Alrighty, thank you so much for being here today. Again, it's so exciting to talk a little bit more, this time about your work with the League of Extraordinary Girl Scientists and your experience as a farmer and working in agriculture. The last time we talked, we spoke a lot about your activism focused on women's rights. And today, I would like it if you could please introduce yourself once again and then provide some background on your career journey as a farmer, particularly your focus on sustainable living and community education. And since last time we spoke so much about your work as an advocate for women's rights, I'd also like to see how you see your domestic violence advocacy intersecting with your work in agriculture and sustainability.
So where to start? I asked myself, how did I ever get to be a farmer? I was really an unlikely person to be a farmer. I hated being in a country school. So I know as a little girl, I loved trees and I found them to be a great hiding place. It just started to evolve and people would grow things and I thought that was interesting and I liked the idea of cooking food. Although my mom was the worst cook in the universe, everything tasted the same. You'd have to look at the can to know what it was supposed to be and there was never enough. There just was never enough food. When I got married, the first time I married the son of a farmer, and his family, his mother's family, had owned this land for many, many generations. And that was my first experience. My first husband's mother was named Ruth Brown, and she changed my life because I wanted to be her. She was writing a little kids book. She was a farm woman. She never learned to drive. In fact, after her husband died, I taught her to drive on a very big stock truck. I don't know how he did it, and I'm still alive to tell. But she was somebody who tried things, and she really inspired me, and I loved her. And people used to say the reason I married her son was because I wanted her to be my mom.
Hmm.
But I was always looking for a mom, so that might be true. Anyway, and then I got divorced, and I married a man who was a farmer, and his family had been farmers forever
Mhm.
and they lived on 100 acres. And that was where I learned that if I wasn't going to be hungry, I was going to learn to eat the vegetables I hated as a kid.
Yeah.
And that is where vegetables became really important in my life, not only because I was hungry a lot of the time, but also because it seemed so inspiring to grow potatoes and then in the winter go down in the cellar and there were the potatoes. And so you weren't going to be hungry because you had stockpiles of things. So I was a battered woman and I have talked about that before and seriously grateful that I have my life, that I'm alive to tell that I was a battered woman. And so living on this farm helped me in many ways, but it also taught me that I was resilient. But I wasn't allowed to work and I wasn't allowed to go anywhere and I didn't have money. And when I wanted things, I bartered.
Mhm.
So my neighbors were all cousins of my husband, so I was allowed to interact with them. And so I would help them can. They gave me canning jars. They taught me how to do a lot of things that I wished I had known already. And I think it sustained me. I think the reason I'm alive is because I found comfort in the soil. I feel very touched by that, in that it was my first experience really of that the soil could give you life in more than just food.
You have used the soil as a source for your life, and you've also used it as a place and a vehicle for community education in the work that you're currently doing, both through the League of Extraordinary Girl Scientists, where you teach young girls about agriculture in many ways, and also at Warmke Farm and through Women Grow Ohio. These are different ways that you have facilitated community education in relation to that agricultural work that you have been doing. Do you want to talk a little bit about that as well?
Well, there are two things at the heart of everything I do. One is social justice, and the other is bringing women to the table. So they make rules. They make the rules I want to live by. And so it only makes sense to be in agriculture. This is where we give life. You know what? We're giving birth. We're cutting all these little slips and we're putting them in soil and we're giving birth. So I didn't have lots of children, but I've grown thousands and probably millions of plants. And along the way, I have drugged women along because everything in agriculture intersects with everything else in society. It
Mm.
is the root of all things. It's where nutrition comes from. It's where happiness comes from. It's where beauty comes from. Nothing is better than nature's beauty. And so it's a source of life. And so to me, it seems natural that women would be the growers and the caretakers, the caregivers. I did say when Jay wanted to get married that I was going to go back and be a farmer when I got to be, I didn't say old, but I said when I got to where I was going, I'd know it. And that's exactly what happened. So and I'm going to answer your question even more, but I have to show how this is rooted in birth, in
Mm,
life. And that is when our granddaughter was going to be born. They lived 1,000 miles away in Ohio. And Ohio was where I was always coming back to.
mm,
No matter what land I was in, what country or whatever, my heart, my everything was always in Ohio. My grandma said, if you remember you're from Ohio, you can be proud of yourself. So
mm,
I loved my grandma. And even though I don't believe that's true to today, I like to think it is. Anyway, what happened then was when Jay wanted to get married, I said, you have to understand that when I get to a certain point, and I'll know what that is, uh, I'm going to be a farmer again. And he's like, I don't care. Do whatever you want to do. I just want you to marry me.
mm,
And then I said, and I don't want to change my name. He goes, call yourself Miss Pickle. I don't care. I just want you to marry me. So there we went. And then about 12 years later, when our granddaughter was going to be born, they were in Ohio and we did not want to be absentee grandparents. So I said, this is the moment. We're going to buy some land and then we're going to build a house that everybody can come to when they need refuge, when they need a place to be. And Jay's like, okay. I mean, he's such a wonderful soul. He doesn't always just go along blindly. He asks all the right questions. So when our granddaughter was going to be born, I came here and I started to look for land. And I always said I'd know when I got to it. So I had looked at a lot of pieces of land. They were horrible. They were coal slags and they'd been clear cut. I mean, this is Southeast Ohio. We are extraction economy, original. It was a rainy day and I saw this ad in the paper from a land company. And I think this is important in the story because it wasn't about going into debt. It was about this sort of partnership with this land company. And yes, they held the financing and we paid it off because we were trying to see, is this really work? And anyway, so I called Jay and he came from Florida because the baby was coming. He was worse than me about all that. He's like, the baby's coming. I have to be there. And we went to go see this land, and I had driven out to see it. And I was so disappointed because when I got out of the car, it was just like it was Southeast Ohio. It was straight up and down, and it was just horrible. At one point, I had to sit down on my butt to go down the hill, and then I'd crawl back up the hill. And I thought, no way, this isn't land for me. I'm 5'1". What am I going to do? So when he came, by the time he came, I was convincing myself there had to be another road on this land. I was sure it was it. And so he came with me and we went a different way and we walked on this flat place and we came into this clearing and it was surrounded by quaking aspens. And I looked at him and I said, this is it. Let's write the check.
mm,
So it was in the right place, just looking at the wrong thing. Story of life. So that was the story of what became Blue Rock Station, which is a sustainability center and a farm. And
mm.
eventually, Warmke Farm came out of that when I thought maybe I might need to leave at some point because I was getting old. And thank God I did create an LLC. And Jay thought it was kind of a dumb idea, but now I think as many of my ideas, he now sees how smart they
Oh. And so
were.
you talked about how bringing women to the table has been a huge part of the work that you're doing, and you just
Yeah,
talked
yeah.
about creating that LLC, which has now been a huge channel for you as you've moved away from Blue Rock Station. Can I ask, how have the challenges facing rural women changed since you began your work, and what barriers do women still face when they're trying to be taken seriously as the primary operators of businesses, NGOs, LLCs? You have so much experience, and I'd just love to hear more.
Well, here's the deal. I bought land with my husband and I thought, okay, I'm going to build a house. I don't know what it's going to look like, but it's got to be something unique because this place is so friggin' poor. Um, it's got to make a difference for other people. When I started wanting to build the house. I didn't know what it was going to be. And then when I heard the architect Michael Reynolds, who built earthships, um, mainly out of tires and cans and bottles, I had no idea how I was going to do that. I'd never built anything other than a tent over the swing set when I was a kid, put sheets and clothespins, and then I had a house I could hide in. So I called Jay and I said, I found out what we should do. He said, "Oh, you're so right." I love hearing those words from him. You're so right that it's you, it's us, it's everything that we dream of. And that was the beginning. However, it was also the beginning of me leaving the world of women, where I was always organizing women, fighting for women, hanging with women. My birthday was a big swap where women came and we swapped things. Anyway, my life was women. And then I went to 100% literally men. And I was not prepared for the bullshit. Even though I lived in a world with criminal justice and judges and all the things that I dealt with, it wasn't an everyday thing. I learned a lot about my management style. I learned a lot about who I am as a person by managing those men. And I did a lot of things that changed how they saw women. And I don't mean by, berating and beating up. I suddenly realized all you have to do is give a little motivation, a little bit of reward, and they are going to take care of everybody. And that's what they did. And they were so proud. Anyway, I drugged those men, some of those men with me back to Florida to work on buildings down there. I mean, they really changed. They changed as human beings, and it was a joy to watch it happen. And I was running a women's fund when I wasn't there, and that was all about inspiring women. It really comes down to that. I realized when I was starting shelter projects is this is not about creating safe housing. It is not about changing laws because they don't benefit women and they never will. They're there to punish us if we fight back. So, what if we just started focusing on how people interact? So, one of the first things I did after I had started building the house and started all these other projects was start something called the Working Woman's Think Tank. And that was the intersectionality that I was looking for. So I had judges and the lawyer for the governor, the first woman I got out of prison, another woman who'd been in prison and for selling drugs, and I'd helped her get out. And so we had these weekend adventures. At my house, everybody slept on the floor. It was unbelievable that they would do it. They had women in their expensive suits and everything showing up, and I got to change my clothes, but we would sleep on that floor. So the idea was to say, what would it take? What exactly would it take to change a culture from white boys being born thinking they're in charge of everything just by the fact that they're born to everybody sitting at the table? It's not a gender issue. It's not an issue at all. It's like, who has the gift to lead the meeting? Who has the gift to carry out some of the things that need to be done? I know that sounds unrealistic, but what we found in all of our research and our talking and our experiences, because everybody had a ton of experience as women being, ill-treated, women not having opportunity. Even the women that were the judges and stuff, they talked a lot about how awful it was in the judicial system. So, but it came down to rewarding good behavior. It came down to examples like seeing a guy in the store and he's being really nice to his kid and saying, that is such a joy to see, and pointing out what it was you saw. So you're rewarding very specifically. Or if there's a problem, just say, could I be helpful today? I know what it's like to, be overwhelmed. But we kept laying that template on things. And that became then the basis of everything I did from there. So I felt I got to create opportunity. I have to create opportunity where we can say, not like the helicopter parents where well done at any turn, but well done because you just showed me how. You just showed me how to be a better person or be a kinder person. Um, and that's where it all intersects. So it's only about women because, well, first of all, I know how to be one. I'm an expert. But secondly, it's because nobody came for me. And I realized what the answer is. And there are many answers, but it's all built on this one thing. And that is, how do we start with ourselves and in our home and in our environment, and then with our neighbors, and then with our kin, and then with everything else. How do we then lay these templates on that? And it's possible, it's so doable, it costs nothing but the will to do it. And when it comes to white men, and I keep saying white men because this is the problem, white young men, and then in today, white really old men, the problem is they are not going to give up opportunity to have power, opportunity to have an influence on the consequences or the laws. They are not. We must take it. So, how do we take it? We take it by organizing ourselves, by lifting each other up, by looking back and saying to the men who love and support us, this is what we need you to do. You need to show up and do the dishes and diaper the kids, or you need to speak up and say something in a meeting, whatever that is. But it seems so simple. So this is the work. It's social justice, it's equality, it's peace, it's everything.
Throughout numerous conversations we have had, you've brought up the importance of having, men who are supporting you in your work to support women's rights. And you also use that word intersectionality. And so I would love if you could expand on that a little bit and talk about, the ways in which our social systems affect people across all genders and how intersectionality has informed your work, both in terms of women's rights advocacy, but also in relation to agriculture and the work that you're doing now with young girls as well through the League of Extraordinary Girl Scientists.
Well, one thing that popped into my head just before you started talking was that I'm not just talking about women. It's only that's what the focus is, but it's anybody. And it definitely includes, every kind of gender. One of the things that has been very powerful for me is when the word non-binary came out and I understood what it was, I felt, oh my God, there's finally a word that describes me. I'm in this, like always in everything in my life, sort of this neutral place, even though you wouldn't believe it, of not just my own sexuality, but in how I see life and how I see nature is that we all just work together and it doesn't matter. I don't care, So I spent one whole summer with an intern that was so into this whole thing about gender issues. And it was such an amazing summer because every day we had these conversations and every day it just showed me more and more who I am and how I interact with others. I'm not always great about the she, they, them, but it's the work that I do. I hope that gets me out of trouble sometimes. Anyway, not to make light of it. So everything really is about everybody. And I think we have to pick our poison, as they say, and say, look, this is where I'm going to set my bottom down, and this is where I'm going to take my stand, and this is what I'm going to do with it. For me, it became agriculture because that's where I wanted to be all my life. And then I'm here and I'm looking up and I'm looking at women and I'm going, wait a minute, we're not even in the equation. So, probably about 13 or 14 years ago, I got a census results from the US Department of Agriculture. And I was absolutely shocked that there weren't any women really in the census. And I mean, I knew hundreds of women in Ohio that were managing or owning farmland from various sizes to, 5 acres to thousands of acres. And I was like, what the hell? So I saw this right before we had our Yule party. And so a lot of the people that came to Yule are farmers and farm women. And one of them was an urban farmer, one of them's a rancher, and then me, who's somewhere in the middle. And we were out looking at the globes that we send off in the night with our wishes for the new year. And I said, we should just show these boys. There are lots of women and we are doing kick-ass things. All the studies show we're producing better food on less land. We're working together. Let's make a farm tour of women. And of course they go, okay, sure. So we made a little Facebook page, and in 4 days, we had 400 women come on to the page. That was pretty shocking and a little bit unnerving because I thought, what the heck are we doing? So we created what was called Women Grow Ohio. And the goal was to bring women together so they could see we're doing this. And we did little 1 day conferences, and we got sponsors, we raised money, we did more farm tours. The first farm tour we did, though, we had, I think, 17 farms, and 4 or 5 were in Columbus. So there became this rift between the urban farm women and the, as they called them, the real farm women. And there was a fight. I was like, no, no, this is not how this works. It's all racism. It's all sexism. It's all exclusionary. We can't do this. So then the next thing that happened was the men in a lot of these women's lives tried to shut it down. They told them, you can't be on that. You're not doing anything. And the women were very enthusiastic in the beginning. And then I would call because they had sent a note saying, I'm not going to do it. And they'd start crying. So some of them stayed in and went against the grain of the guy in their life. And some of them we never heard from again because they were embarrassed by being told that they didn't do enough. And then by the fact that we were like, we don't care. We just want you. You're a woman. I know there was a woman who was transgender, and there was so much hate aimed at her that we actually went to her farm. So, I mean, agriculture is just at the root of things. That's what I'll say. Skip to 2017, and the USDA decided they were going to add a second line to the agriculture census. And the headline in the Farm and Dairy Journal, when it was released, said basically, can you believe that women are 37% of agriculture in this state? And it was only because we were allowed to be counted on the census. It's just they weren't being counted. So, when Obama came in as president, there was a lot of wonderful things that happened with USDA and women. They had a wonderful website. They did all kinds of really good training. And I was just amazed at how well they were done. But what happened the day that Trump was inaugurated, the entire website disappeared. Everything. Because we can't be having women learn stuff, know stuff, be, yeah, against the law. But we have news for him, Willow. It might be his law, but we don't live by his law.
In situations like some of the ones that you have mentioned, and in situations where there are legal barriers or industry barriers as, women are trying to access farmland, trying to work towards a career as a farmer, what forms of mentorship do you feel are most effective for new women farmers?
I think anything that people want to do to mentor anybody is valuable because hacks, the bullshit, you may even know the government crap. It's all, it's all harsh. And we all need mentors. Even as an old woman, I don't need a mentor in agriculture. I need a mentor to help me be an old woman. You know, we owe this to each other, and we've lost this in our culture. I feel like one of the things that has been valuable in my life has been my internship program. And I started that because I had the mother from hell and I couldn't be to her what I wanted to be. And I thought, what will I do with all this love I have? And so I started an internship program. And there have been over 100 interns that have lived with us over 8 to 10 weeks, sometimes longer. Sometimes they came back. And then, of course, they often have come back for different events and things. But then I decided right before COVID hit, I'd form an advisory group out of former interns because I was getting old and I was thinking, all right, maybe I'm not thinking futuristic enough. And that was really a gift to myself. The first meeting, I cried through the whole thing because here they are. They're adults now. They're looking good. They're feeling good. They're struggling a little bit and smarter than whips still. And I just thought, wow, this is the energy that I want and need and have had from them from day one. The minute they walked on the farm, they were all amazing. So anyway, they have carried me through since 2018. And when COVID hit, they had a lot of good ideas and they were eager to be together online. And they kept saying, Annie, you need to get help. You need, not meaning I need help like something's wrong with me, but somebody to clean the house or somebody to help when it's kidding season or whatever. So then when I was seriously injured and had to learn to walk again, they they showed up for 60 days. Somebody showed up many times unannounced with food, came to stay, came to clean something, came to milk goats, whatever it was. It was humbling, just humbling. People from all over the world showing up, many tears and sadness that they were leaving, and I couldn't even get up really. But what then began to transpire was this whole thing that they had helped me put into place around 2020. And that was the idea that the farm would not ever be sold. That was Jay's and my goal, but we have no kin to give it to that was ready to receive it. And so we decided to explore what form could this take, that it would go into some kind of trust or whatever, so that new farmer could come onto the land and not have debt. This was really important to me personally. So we had a lot of former interns that we would have loved to actually give Blue Rock Station to, and they would love to be farmers, seriously, but they're just not quite ready. And I don't want to set anybody up. So we met Ian McSweeney, who is now the co-director of the Farmers Land Trust. And he just has a way of explaining things. And I just thought, that's it. That's what we're going to do. And we'll just know when it's time. So after I was injured, we had our annual goat stock in the summer where interns and friends come. And we had a big meeting, and 26 people came early to talk to Ian and Christina Villa, who's the other director, and learn more about the trust and how it would work. And then that kick-started everything that's gone on for the last 2 years, which is a transition of finding a farmer, of putting together legal documents, of defining what is the basis of what needs to happen on this farm, like you can't spray chemicals, things like that. And then we found a farm family that had 2 kids, which was really important to me personally because that leaves a legacy, and they have a 99-year lease. And they've really thrown themselves into learning permaculture, and they're doing big things. And next week they're going to have goats again, and everybody's excited to have goats. And I've been real involved. I talk to at least Sarah, that's one of the farmers, every week, and Cora, their daughter, and Sarah involved in legs, and that's been a joy. We just want to be sure that we are being good mentors and that we're providing what they need, not just what we think they need. It's not ended for me, but that's how Blue Rock Station has ended. And it's been earth shattering. But in the meantime, we bought a place in Marietta thinking that we had to get broadband. The broadband at the farm was worse than dial up. So I ripped everything out of the backyard and I started a food forest garden because I wanted to sustain us in a way that was unique to urban setting. And we have an incredible garden now. This is the 3rd year. And today, as of today, just before I came to talk to you, we are starting the next piece in the yard next door. Warmke Farm is my farm. My backyard is my farm. And then my neighbors' yards are my paddocks. So I now have 2 neighbors that I have a fledgling food forest garden in that I have been working on. And I have 3 more that want me to do it. And it will change everything. It will change the temperature in the neighborhood. It changes, people are talking to each other. And I sell some plants because, if I want to have a tax deduction, I got to make a dime. But then I give away a lot of herbs and the herbaceous plants and things to encourage people. They come and they try the plants, they eat them in something, they have tea with them, and they go, "Oh yeah, I want to grow that." Now, it's true, they are very early in their garden life and they're really bad at it so far. Well, that's what gardening's about. You kill it and then you try again, or it didn't work there, you move it. This is how life should really be. I really just believe this is how we get through life, is we just keep switching up, changing, adapting, leaving things behind that are toxic, whatever, pulling the weeds. I
Yeah.
like, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's where we are. And then I wanted to reinstitute the League of Extraordinary Girl Scientists, which I started when my granddaughter was in junior high, and there was nothing for girls around science. It was all about sports or boys, and both of those will get you in trouble one way or another. So I said to my granddaughter, we should start a science club because she was such a gifted scientist and she spoke two languages and she just had a lot going. And so we started it, and she wanted to call it the League of Extraordinary Girl Scientists, which spells legs. And it was incredibly successful in that we only had girls that were F students. They were getting thrown out of school. They could go down the hall and kick 8 girls' asses all at the same time. And so the first day I used the F word quite liberally, and talked a lot about the whole thing about having attention deficit, and that there's this book, and we would look at the book called That's What's Cool About Girls. And the first thing in the book is what I called a pissed off test. And so we'd all take the pissed off test, including me. And then I would show all my results, and they would go from being really sad and being told, my mom said I'm not allowed to tell that I have this diagnosis and I take medicine and everything, to laughing and pinching me and saying, you're one of us and ha ha ha. But now we're starting over. We're working with Marietta College, and they've given us their thrift store for the summer. And the girls are doing all kinds of really cool things around math and don't even think about it as math, like how does it make revenue and what are the expenses and all that stuff. And we're meeting up with women accountants. We're going to do a fashion show, and the fashion's going to come out of the thrift store. I did think a little bit guilty that we're focused on clothes and they're 13 and 14, but I thought you got to go where they're at. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's cool work that you're doing with a good group of kiddos, and they seem really excited about what you
Yes,
have
they
planned.
are.
So, it's a good way to get kids involved is to meet them at their interests and find ways to connect those interests to science and math and engineering. And I think you have done that very successfully. So I'm really excited to see as the League of Extraordinary Girl Scientists in its current iteration progresses. The last question that I wanted to ask you, you've talked so much about mentorship, about the League of Extraordinary Girl Scientists, about all the work that you're doing in Appalachia and elsewhere. And I wanted to ask you what advice you would give to young women who want to advocate for rural and otherwise marginalized or minoritized communities.
I've thought about that question many times over my career because I've led delegations of women all over the world to learn from women in war zones and really tough places. And I've spent a lot of time with mostly teenage girls when I go to those places because I want to hear what they have to say. And it's not unique, it's everywhere. We have to mentor. We must mentor. If we do nothing else, it doesn't even have to be a young girl or a young boy, but they are there and they need it. They really need it. You need it because guess what happens? Every story I have here has two sides. And I don't talk about that as much as maybe I should. And that other side is what joy, what courage, what boldness, what inspiration all of these young people have given to me. They've guided me. They have called me on my stuff. They dance with me. They, you know, all the good things that life should be full of, no matter how old you are. But young people must have mentoring. And
Mhm.
we can prove it. The suicide rate, the drug addiction rate, these are all escape mechanisms. What are they trying to escape? Is they don't belong, they don't feel connected. And now we have AI. So children are developing relationships. They'll never know a human relationship of somebody their own age. So we have to mentor. And mentoring is not about being the teacher. It is about being the partner to
Mhm.
this person, to every person. It works that way with dogs. It works that way with goats. How are you the partner? Don't be the boss. I do say I'm a benevolent dictator. When it comes down to it and the house is on fire, I'm going to order you. And I am a directive person, but I really believe that if we can take care of ourselves and understand our own selves as much as possible and take care of ourselves in that way,
Mhm.
we have the capacity to reach out to other people and try. And it does take courage sometimes. It takes boldness, but the payoff is huge, just huge. It's the lottery, winning the lottery.
Thank you so much,
I,
Annie.
yeah, I can't help it. I mean, my life is just, as we've been talking and all the things I've been writing lately, it just keeps slapping me in the face and saying, that's it. You won the lottery just because you tried.
Yeah, that's a great note to end on. Thank you so much.
All righty. Take
Yeah.
care. We'll talk.
Take care. Have a good one.